Hello, unprofessionals, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Unprofessional Development. On today's episode, we have an administrator. Oh, so many questions and things we can learn from our administrators, all right? So we hope that you enjoy it. It's an administrator I admire, and that's why I had him on the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Parking Spot. You know, you don't have anything to complain about? Everything's going well? Why not complain about your parking spot? Oh, maybe it's too far and you have to walk a whole 30 seconds to get to your room. Maybe someone else has a better parking spot to you and gives you a reason not to like them. Or maybe someone doesn't like you because you have a better parking spot. Oh, we just need things we can argue, complain, and divide ourselves on, so Parking Spot does that when we don't have other things. Please enjoy today's episode.
It's okay to be unprofessional. This is your teacher confessional. Real teachers and stories are real. You gotta laugh with the disco and meal.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys, girls, children of all ages, welcome to another exciting episode of Unprofessional Development. I'm Tedisco.
And I'm Mealy. And we've got Mr. Admin with us today. So exciting.
Hi, Mr. Admin.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, we have not had an administrator on here yet, so this is a good get for us.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah. We know there's lots of questions that teachers have that they want to ask.
I'm counting this as your teacher observations, by the way.
That's good. That's good.
Good.
Hopefully I get good marks. I don't know. We'll see. And that's something we definitely want to talk about because teachers have so many questions for admin, I think, that sometimes maybe they're afraid to ask or there seems to be some mystery behind some of these things. So we want to kind of get behind the curtain a little bit. So before we get too deep into it, though, kind of like give us just like a little bio of why you became a teacher versus something else. Well, you used to be a lawyer, right, first, and then you got into teaching, and then...
Well, and I did things between that and then ultimately teaching as well, so...
Okay, so walk us down the path a little bit.
Yeah, so when I finished college, which was a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, I went straight to graduate school, which was law school.
Okay.
And finished, graduated, passed the North Carolina bar, and I practiced law briefly in Charlotte with a small firm. And
what kind of law, just out of curiosity?
It was a small firm. It was two partners that were expanding their practice. I mean, it was just the two of them, and they were expanding their practice, and so they needed a young associate. So they hired me, and not that I was some idealist. I mean, I think maybe I was to a certain extent, but it just, I was there and just doing this kind of mundane work, real estate closings, a little bit of personal injury. We did occasionally some.
Yeah, it's mostly just like lots of paperwork.
Yeah, it was just, right? It just wasn't me. I mean, it just was not me. And that's not to say that it doesn't work for many thousands of people, because it does. So, to be honest with you guys, I just kind of bounced around a little bit because I just knew I didn't want to do that. My wife's a career teacher, and I had talked about teaching for several years. And so when I got to about age 30, 31, something like that, my first daughter was born. She was very young, and I was like, well, damn, I need a career, not just a job, And so my wife and I decided, like, let's just do it. Go back to school, get your teaching license, and then, kind of here I am.
Cool.
And that was 19 years ago.
Okay.
So
you had some experience, and her experience didn't scare you off of it. It actually, lured you in. So because, and maybe we can have her on sometime as well. I hadn't even thought about that, having her on and having the two of you on at the same time, but that would have been cool. But
she'll be able to say what a schmuck I am for leaving law to go teach.
Well, I'm pretty sure if they just actually wrote it out how it's supposed to happen with all the paperwork, it would probably double the length of To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right. That's exactly.
Yeah, then Atticus filled out a 13th file.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, but when you're a teacher, one of the wise things to do is to marry someone with a significantly higher income than you. And
I think you meant to say real job.
So marry a lawyer. That sounds good. I'll marry a doctor. I'll marry a lawyer, an accountant, right? Something like that. That will be good.
Yeah,
no, I guess not.
That's probably what my wife's mother-in-law was thinking when Deborah first met me. And then, like a few months later, it's like, oh, what a loser. Leaving. He left law to become a teacher.
Fool.
Yeah, he's not sure if he's going to do that. He's considering stocking shelves or flipping burgers after that.
Right. That's exactly right. No, it was definitely a good choice for me. I mean, obviously, we worked together for several years, so how I kind of approach things in a school building.
Yeah.
I just love being in school, man. This is, I just love it.
And that's one of the reasons why I want to have you on, because Mr. Admin, he just is someone that I had experience with, and one of the things that we really like here is, and one of the main qualifications, I think, for being a teacher or an admin, whatever, is loving kids and just really being able to connect with kids. Because if you don't like kids, whether it's you're in elementary school doing elementary or high school or whatever, and you don't like teenagers, then it doesn't matter how much you like math or science or summers off.
A job that pays you.
Right. Then they're not going to like that. But so.
That's exactly right.
Now, obviously, people think they like kids, and then they realize that when they're around them 40 hours a week, they go, "Oh, right. I didn't realize how horrible they were,"
That's exactly right.
And they want to get out. But so let's take one more step, and then we're going to get on to funny stories. So, how did you make the jump, or why did you make the jump from saying, I'm so good at this teaching thing, I should be in charge of all these teachers?
Right.
What a Tarzan swing.
Yes, it is. So my first teaching job, all of my years of teaching, which were about close to 9, were in high school here in Charlotte. And so at the time I was working at a high school. When I started there in 2001, the school had been taken over by the state, because the school was just doing very, very poorly. And there were all these sort of retired professionals that were in the school getting paid by the state to kind of mentor us, mentor teachers, mentor the principal, so on and so forth. This was back before recession of 2008. And so the state had all this money to dump in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman who had been in education for about 30 years, and he had been retired. He had done the gamut, teacher, AP, principal, superintendent, associate superintendent, whatever. Wow. He was basically mentoring our principal, because at that time, if I remember correctly, the principal was either a first or second year principal. And so he was mentoring her, but he ended up kind of unofficial. He was there for about 3 or 4 years, and he sort of ended up unofficially mentoring me.
Okay.
And helping me develop my skills as an educator.
Right.
And, once I started to make some improvements, and it took a while, we sat down and had a conversation. I don't know if it was 2005 or 2006. And he said something to the extent of, you'd probably make a really good administrator. I was like, how come? And he said, well, your background in law and just working in other industries and working with different kinds of people and managing people and so on and so forth. Now you've got some educational experience under your belt, it might be a nice union. And so I really kind of thought about it for a year before I really decided to do something. And then in 2007 is when I decided to actually go and get the degree.
Okay.
And so we finished in 2009, and I've been out of the classroom actually since the fall of 2009. So it's pushing a good amount of time.
Now, I've jokingly said this to some a mutual friend of ours who was a teacher and is now an AP. And when she became an AP, my first words to her when I found out was like, oh, so you've succumbed to the dark side.
You've gone to the dark side.
Was there? Yeah. So did you find that people started were like, oh no, don't do that. Did you get some? Was there a mixed feedback? Well, yeah, from friends who were like, oh God, never mind, we're not friends anymore.
That's an interesting question. So when I was doing the degree, going through the program, the last 2 semesters we had to do a certain number, as you imagine, like we're clinical hours, right? You had to have so many hours of quote unquote administrative tasks, administrative work that you had to document. So you had to work with your principal so that he or she could get you those hours. So in the summer of '08, I had gone through the then script tape training, which the district required at that point for all administrators. I mean, this was a week-long, 8 hours a day learning how to script tape for an observation, where you're like taking down by hand everything that happens. And so after I did that, my principal had me doing some observations. And I remember observing a teacher in our CTE department that I knew pretty well. And we didn't collaborate all that much together. And I gave her what I thought was a pretty honest opinion of what happened in the classroom when I was in there.
Right.
And in that post-conference did not go well.
Oh, no.
That post-conference did not go well. You know, her, like before we sit, because I had an extra pending period to do the administrative tasks that year.
Right.
And so we go to her classroom, and I mean, my first shtick was, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. She didn't want none of that, man. She jumped right in. It was kind of like, I've never received an observation like this before, and I've been teaching for 20 years. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what to say now. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think to a certain extent there was a little bit of that at the very beginning.
Did you adjust the observation based on what you got from her? Did she sway you at all?
No, I didn't. And we spent a lot of time, and this was back under the old observational instrument, which was teacher, professional, appraisal, blah, 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 so.
Right.
Yeah, it's old school. And we went through each of the indicators and talked about, you know, what did I see? And I tried to keep it as objective as possible and then give her some ideas and strategies. And at the end, I mean, I think ultimately she was fine with that. But again, it gets back to, and you mentioned it earlier in the session, just how you're communicating with people and how you're building relationships.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's so true between teacher student. The same is true between administrator and teacher. It's the same concept. You know, if you come in guns blazing, you're going to push people away.
Yeah.
You've got to pull them in just like we do with kids in the classroom. It's the same sort of concept.
Okay. I always consider observation so interesting too, because like for anybody like outside of the teaching profession who might not get it, like we don't get paid or get bonuses based on this. And it's not like they're gonna fire you unless you are like severely like, you know, detrimental in your job. They're mostly just things for us to personally reflect on. Right.
Yep.
And a lot of people just take it very personally. Like I always welcome a really brutal observation because I want to know where I'm messing up. No, I do. Like that's the kind of person I've always been. I tell admin to come to my worst classes. I'm like, tell me what I need. Like I wanna get the worst feedback possible because like I want to improve. Like that's how we get better. That's me. I'm a weirdo.
Well, I think I think you bring up an interesting point, and I've really tried to impress this upon the teachers I've worked with over the years in the observations is if I'm in your classroom and the kids act up, that doesn't bother me. I mean, kids are kids and they're going to do stupid stuff.
Right.
You know, they're going to use profanity when they shouldn't. They're going to get out of their seat. They're going to do that. That's what kids do. And I'm not concerned that they do that. What I want to see is how have you as the teacher prepared your classroom to deal with that? What's the intervention? How do you handle it? How do you redirect the student in a way that keeps things moving and doesn't denigrate that kid just because he got up when you were talking, you know, and obviously that's just one small example, but it's about how you respond in those situations. So when we do the first observations, which is always supposed to be announced, and teachers are always trying to, well, what's my best class, you know?
Right.
But no one says anything. Yeah. You know, in some ways, I don't want to see that because then I don't see how you're developing your practice around interacting with kids, which is the most, you know, one of the things that I've done in the last 3 or 4 years is really push myself to read different educational journals. I mean, I've never been someone who does that on a frequent basis, but I have pushed myself to do that just to kind of stay perhaps a little bit more current with things that are happening out there in the world of education. And one of the things that I read over and over is that you have to provide kids the opportunity to truly process content. Ask questions of the teacher. And it's not just raise your hand if you have a question. I mean, that's basic stuff. I'm talking about really planning your lesson to provide that opportunity for kids to engage. So if a teacher chooses their most quietest class because they're not going to act up, I'm not going to see any of that.
Yeah.
All I'm going to see is the teacher is giving notes or giving them an activity to do, and they do it quietly and you move on. I mean, that's great, but at the end of the day, kids aren't processing the content in that way.
So speaking of observations and stuff like that, a student actually told me this story after I had been observed, and he was telling me about when he'd been in another room where there was another observation. And I actually have like 3 or 4 funny observation stories, but I'm just going to tell this one here. This class, this is the way this teacher ran the class. And you mentioned CTE. This was a CTE teacher, not to bash CTE teachers, which is Career and Technical Education. I think that's what that stands for. Anyway, so basically teachers that teach stuff with computers. It could be home ec type stuff. It could be vocational type stuff. Anyway, this was the teacher's MO. On day 1, there was a PowerPoint presentation, about 10 to 12 slides. Okay? The kids were given some kind of guided notes, so they had to take notes on those 10 to 12 slides. That took approximately 15 to 20 minutes of 80-minute class. The teacher then would say to the kids, that's it. You can do whatever you want. On the following day...
Nailed it, guys.
On the
Take
following...
most teachers 80 minutes, got it done in 10.
On the following day...
I'd love to see the lesson plan for that.
There was a quiz on the previous day's slide presentation. About 10 questions on the 10 slides that you had. That took about another 15, 20 minutes. Then the teacher would say to them, well, when you're done that, you can just do whatever you want. And
time to chill.
And then it was just like a rotation, slideshow, quiz every other day. So an administrator comes in to observe. He goes behind his desk, gets out all these poster boards, markers, all these supplies. He starts handing them out. He puts the kids in groups. They're got this major project that he's given them, and they're all doing all the bells and whistles that the admin wants to see. Oh, they're working in groups, so they're doing this. He's got it all taken care of, right? So
wonderful dog and pony show.
Yes.
Sounds like he brought out 2 dogs and 3 ponies.
Yes. For that. So admin leaves. They get done the observation. Admin, for those of you who don't know, normally is not there the entire class. They're normally there from 20 to 45 minutes of an 80-minute class. Admin leaves. Okay? They're like, so when is this going to be due? Is this going to be for a grade or whatever? He's like, get rid of that stuff. I'm not collecting that. I don't need to see that. That was just for him.
Well, Neely, you know that I develop pretty good relationships with the kids. And so I've had several times over the years where I walk in for an unannounced observation and I catch the teacher off guard. And I'm really good. And I don't know if you remember, Neely, but one of the things that I do, if it's an unannounced observation, I'll email that group of teachers. Let's say I've got 15 teachers that I'm doing their second observation on. I'll email that whole group. And I do it blind carbon copy because some people don't like to know that other people know who's observing who. So I'll BCC it to everybody. Say, hey, I'm doing your second round observation. It's unannounced, but I'll be coming in between, February 1st and March 10th. Just want you to know and be aware. Please let me know if you have any planned absences during that time period. And I've probably been doing this for at least 8 years.
Or if they're going to be given a test, so there's nothing for you to see either.
If you're giving a test or whatever, you have a guest speaker, whatever. And people generally have appreciated that. So it's not like they don't know I'm coming at all.
Right.
But there have been several times over the years where I'll walk in teachers like just sitting at their desk doing nothing, and kids are working on some independent activity.
Mm-hmm.
And once the teacher realizes I'm there, they get up and they move around and they start talking. And then when that happens, like I'll go to one of the kids I know and I'll be like, yo, is this what the teacher really does all the time? And I mean, they'll tell it, the kids will tell it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the kids are like, yeah, she talks to us for 15 minutes and then gives us a worksheet and that's all we do the rest of the time.
Right.
So I'm in my head, I'm thinking that's pretty funny, but at the same time, oh my God, that's awful because, you're not really learning anything.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be, what's the word? Teaching.
Yes.
Teaching.
Yeah.
That's not really teaching. That's giving someone a worksheet.
That's supplemental learning.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
So speaking of the post-op too, I have this one post-op story. One of the things, though, Tedisco seems to want to have like his worst class and get all this negative feedback or constructive criticism, possibly.
I want to know my blind spots. Yeah.
If you do have enough poor marks on your observations consistently enough, then you have to go through some process and you have a little more work to do. And you're like, it varies from state to state, from school to school and all that kind of stuff to do it. But it can end up being, for lack of a better word, it can be kind of a hassle. And some people also think it maybe that they're scared of getting fired or whatever. You know what I mean? And I went through it my early years. I got poor marks and I only like wasn't surprised. I'm like, well, I'm a first year teacher, so I got poor marks. You know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway, this teacher had been teaching for a while and they got poor marks on their observation. So they sit down in the post-op with the administrator. And at this point, you normally discuss stuff. And a lot of times you get questions and go, okay, a lot of administrators that I've done it, they go, I left this part blank because I was only there for 20 minutes and I didn't see this aspect of your teaching. Can you tell me a little bit what you do when or how you handle this, such and such? So anyway, the teacher sits down with the admin. He'd looked at what he'd had, marks that were already there. He said, here's the deal. You've marked me, it was, there's proficient and developing at this point, okay? And he said, you've marked me developing in these 2 or 3 boxes. He said, I'm not leaving this room until you change that to proficient. Like, literally, like, kind of borderline threaten the principal that, like,
it's going to the room.
Yeah, it's going to be much easier for you to point and click than it is get me out of here.
That is bold.
And you know what happened?
He changed it.
He changed it. He's like, thank you. See you later.
Wow.
For those of you listening at home,
don't try this at home.
Don't try this. All right, these are trained professionals we're discussing here. To result in serious injury or death.
So, Mr. Admin, walk us through. That's never happened to you, right?
Well, all I would say to that is, if you've ever seen me break up a fight, I can move you from my room. You could try and stay in my office, but I want you out of there. I'm going to move you.
All right. So, for those of you that can't see, Mr. Admin is built like a fire plug. Is that appropriate? Okay.
Not bad for 51. That's 51 right there.
Nice.
God.
What are you bench pressing these days?
I mean, for years, I haven't like bench pressed for a weight for years, but my guess is if I really tried, I could probably still put up 2 1/4.
Okay.
40.
Okay. Cool.
Kilograms?
I can put up a quarter.
I can lift the bar.
So that moves us to, that's a nice segue though. So we want to get into some yeah, it does. We want to get into some funny
Arnold Schwarzenegger the next character on the show?
Fight stories.
Fight stories.
So you've broken up approximately how many fights in your career?
So let's just say, the $5 challenge, like put away your $5 bill, see how many you can collect in a year. Put it this way, if I had a $5 bill for every fight I've had to get involved in, either breaking, holding somebody back, I'm sure I'd have $1,000. I mean, easily. Easily. I mean, some of the schools that I've worked at in the past have a history of that kind of activity going on.
Okay. So
now is that from like you just being in the right place, the right time, or like do other teachers just actively like stay away from those things when they happen?
That is a great question. And I'm going to share, if you guys allow me, I'm going to share a quick story.
Yeah. That's why you're here.
So I think part of it is, just being in the right place at the right time, but also is people not acting and then I'm, getting there and then have to act because others didn't. So there was a situation I was involved in, and it was two girls who have a bad history with each other, as you might imagine. None of these things are ever random, really.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they're at lunch and they're sitting near each other. That's the one thing that's always is like, you hate each other. Why do you sit near each other? Mm-hmm. They were sitting close to each other. Kind of some words started going back and forth. And then one of the girls walked away. Then she came back about a minute later. And they started getting into it pretty heated. This was like outside of the cafeteria, kind of like in a little walkway area. So I walked around the corner. I see the lane kind of getting in each other's face. So I immediately stepped in, and the one girl that I sort of confronted, if you will, who in my mind was more of the aggressor. This was, let's just say, this was a big person. I mean, she was a big person.
You could not bench press her.
No, much bigger than I. And she was agitated, and she was going toward this girl. So, I mean, it took everything I could do to restrain her. Mm-hmm. And, just getting more heated. So I really had to put her against the wall, for lack of a better word.
Right.
What was hilarious, though, and this went on for several minutes, and there was a bunch of chaos, whatever.
Right.
But afterwards, we were watching it on the surveillance video, because this happened right in an area where the surveillance video captured the whole thing. And watching the video was hilarious. Because first of all, as you know, at the schools, there's no audio on the surveillance cameras.
Right.
It's just video. So you see all these different teachers just kind of milling around in the crowd while I'm like struggling with this girl. It's like David versus Goliath.
Right.
I'm struggling to keep this girl from going to kill this other girl. And teachers are just rummaging around. They're kind of putting their hands up. Get back. Like they're at a concert and they don't want people to cross the front line.
Right.
Get back.
Right.
And after like 4 minutes, this one teacher comes into the picture. He's got his coffee cup in his hand. And
right.
He's like looking around with his coffee cup. Yo, what's up? I'm here. Anybody need help? It's just like me and one of the other administrators were watching that. We just died laughing. We're like, what is this guy doing?
Yes.
I do want to hear your perspective on that, though, because I've heard different things from different people and different teachers and different administrators. Yeah. So if a teacher does see a fight, what do you think they should do?
So one thing, and in all seriousness, I mean, people should never put themselves in a situation that they feel like they might be injured or hurt themselves. And there are policies and procedures that school districts put out, and then obviously state legislators put out laws relative to educators engaging in physical confrontations. What is expected of teachers, quite frankly, is if you're not comfortable, and you don't have to jump into a fight. No, you don't have to do that. No one expects you to do that. But you've got to take proactive steps to kind of minimize the chaos in that situation. Mm-hmm. Be proactively involved in keeping other students away, calling for help.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do that's going to benefit the situation without putting yourself in harm's way. That's what I think educators need to be able to do. There are always going to be people who are willing to kind of jump in and physically break the fight up. But other people who aren't comfortable doing that, which is absolutely okay, you've got to do something proactive. You can't just stand there.
Right. Because then you're just part of the problem.
Well, that's exactly right. And quite frankly, I mean, I've been around long enough to see where, parents then see those videos. Nowadays, I mean, when a fight happens, kids are seeing it and parents are seeing it way before we do.
Yeah, it's live streaming sometimes.
Sometimes
from
Facebook
every angle.
Live, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, sometimes a parent will call me later in the day and they'll say, hey, I just got a different clip from Instagram of the fight. You need to see this. And it's a whole different perspective. And then you realize, well, something else really happened.
Right.
Or sometimes just the same fight, but with Miley Cyrus's wrecking ball in the background. Way more entertaining.
Yes. Hey, I'm TikTok dancing over the fight.
Like a wrecking ball.
Yes. Yes.
So, with that being said, I mean, people have to be cognizant of what they're doing because you're going to be on camera. I don't care if it's a surveillance camera. I don't care if it's a kid's cell phone. You're going to be on. So if you're doing nothing, if you're literally just standing there when you could be pushing kids back, whatever, not physically, but just,
confiscating cell phones even.
Yeah. Right. I mean, telling kids to put their cell phones down and a parent sees that, they're going to come after you. And I mean, I've seen that a lot. So I think all of us as educators have to be aware that when we're in confrontational situations like that, people are recording it and people are going to see it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unfortunate that you have to think about that, but it's just the reality.
Right, because everyone makes decisions in the heat of the moment that afterwards they go, oh, I wish I hadn't said that or done that. But one of the things that a security guard said to me once, I can't remember which security guard it was, but it stuck with me. It's helped me a couple of times when I've seen agitated kids, is they said, tell the kid to look in your eyes. When when they're heated and they haven't quite come to blows, or maybe you've separated them and they're 1.5 round 2, whatever, tell them just look at me. And when they look at you and they can kind of, the rest of the world kind of blurs out, then that's step one, because until you get them to do that, nothing you're saying is even being processed because their adrenaline is up. They're in a rage mode. If you can get them to okay, it's just you and me right here for a minute, and we can kind of and then we can kind of get you to take a breath, and then we can get you to kind of de-escalate. And I've done that one time. This kid, I could see that she was agitated and she was heading towards the bus lot, to do that. And I said, hey, just I could just see it all over her face, and she was just walking with pretty quickly, and I'm like, something isn't right here. I'm like, what's going on? I did that. I had her look at me, and then as we got to talking, she just broke. You know what I mean? And she literally went from being super angry to just crying, and she, you know what I mean? And she just, there's just so much pain sometimes going on with these kids that they just need to know that there's somebody there with them on their side, and then they go, okay, I don't have to do this. You know what I mean?
Well, you were able to de-escalate her,
right?
With that strategy, and it worked. And then she, kind of started to quote unquote cool down, and then the emotions hit.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely true.
Right. I'm sure you've seen that happen as well.
I mean,
kids that were fired up. Yeah, and you get them in the office, and then
they start crying, or because it's just this emotional rush of adrenaline. And once that the source of the adrenaline is gone, and they're in this quiet setting, then the emotions just kind of rush in.
Yeah.
Without all
Your brain's not flooded anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
well, here's a good question for you, just to kind of bring the humor back up. What are some of the silliest things that kids told you were the reason for the fight?
I mean, most fights seem to emanate from somebody said something about someone else, I mean, that's the overwhelming majority.
Right.
I would probably, and this is another one of those things, don't do this at home. Right. But one of the things that I used to do, because I had such strong relationships with the kids, and I still do this now.
Right.
Was always able to talk to the kids in a way that just got them to, talk freely, but calm down. So kids would say something like, well, and he called me or he called me whatever. I'd kind of sit there for a few seconds and let it settle in. And then I would look at the kid and I would say, well, are you a the kid would say no. And then I would say, well, what are you worried about? You know, and it was kind of a twofold approach. Number one, it was try to catch them off guard a little bit. Cause you know, when you redirect them in a way that they don't expect, that can change the whole dynamic.
Right.
And then number two, because I knew I had a good relationship with the kids, it was a way to get them to crack a smile and laugh a little bit, which also is a good way to help diffuse tense situations. And I don't want to say it worked every time, but it certainly was a benefit more than not, because it helped calm them down. They could laugh a little bit about it. You know, yeah, it didn't take away that anger that they had. At least it was a way to mollify that situation in a quick instant.
Right. Mealy, I got 2 fights I broke up for ridiculous reasons.
Do you? Okay, go ahead.
So I break up a lot of fights actually, which is weird because I am not big, just dumb.
You don't have to be big to break up fights. You don't have to be big to break up.
I mean, most of them it's just stopping them before they start. Like you see them starting up, like all right, let's calm down, let's go for a walk. Like
yeah,
okay. And then I'll tell you about some fights that I started later. Okay.
I've broken up plenty of Mealy's fights.
Now, this was before I was a teacher. But anyway, go ahead, Tedesco.
So I had 2 boys ready to go to blows, and I wound up like pulling them apart and calming them down. And security came back to me later so I could write a statement. They're like, you know what it's about? I was like, no, I didn't hear. They said, they were arguing about what's better, PlayStation or Xbox. Like, yeah, no, that's a good reason to get suspended for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's good.
And then another one kind of just shows like the spotlight syndrome that teenagers have, where like they're so stuck in their own minds, they just forget there are other humans in the universe. These 2 girls were about to fight, and this one girl was, you know, really heated up, and they're both very sweet girls in both my class. Like it happened in my classroom. And so I pulled them apart and I talked them down. I could talk to one girl. I was like, so what's the problem? She goes, well, she's always talking to her friends about me, and I always hear them like talking behind my back and like laughing at me and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. Then I pull the other girl out. I'm like, so what's going on? And the other girl says, nothing. We're talking in Spanish, and she thinks we're talking about her.
Nice.
And so I talked to the first girl again. She's like, yeah, they're always saying stuff to me in Spanish. I'm like, do you speak Spanish? She's like, no. I'm like, then how do you know they're talking about you?
Oh, wow.
Well, that's another big reason I think is kids always say, well, so and so was talking about me.
Right.
And how do you know that? Well, so and so said that they saw on a post after the mother read it that you know, and I'm just like,
oh,
you know, I'm trying to make notes on how they document these.
Right. 6 degrees of separation. Yeah.
Because somebody told me that you had a boyfriend who looked like the girlfriend that I had in February of last year.
That's exactly right.
This was when I was an exterminator, and we sprayed apartments. So we were in this one apartment, and this lady was spraying her bugs, you know, killing some roaches in her apartment. And she says to me, hey, I didn't have any roaches till those people moved next door. So what do I say? I go, really? They said they didn't have any roaches till they were living next door to you. I'm like, see you later. Have a good weekend. So,
there were no survivors.
Right. I have no idea what happened. I just pushed the buttons and walked away. So
here's your $50 bill, and I'll see you later.
Yeah. So
sounds about right.
We had a kid this isn't about fighting, but it just made me think of it. We had a kid one time. I was in my office with a couple other administrators, and the kid had been pulled out of class because there was a pretty strong smell of marijuana emanating from his person. So we're asking this kid, you know, have you been around marijuana recently? Do you have any on you? And, you know, this guy's like, no, sir, very polite, you know, just no, I don't know. So I said, well, we're going to have to search you. Is that okay? And he says, yes, sir, absolutely. So he takes his jacket off, do a pat down search his jacket. And then the other administrator says, can you remove your shoes, please? We're going to have to look at your shoes. And he goes, absolutely, no problem. Yes, sir. Takes his shoes off. So the other administrator's going through his shoes. And I mean, he finds like 3 little gram bags of marijuana, which the way the rule book is written, more than one individually wrapped package is intent to sell.
Yep.
Right.
Which is pretty serious. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago. So, I mean, I knew right off the bat this guy was going to get for this, or a year at the alternative school.
Right.
So he pulls out the marijuana. He gives it to me. So I put it on my desk and just kind of spread it out. And I look at him and I say, "What's this?" In an instant, his whole demeanor changes. He's like, "Man, I don't know what the hell that is. Who put that?" You know, he's like cussing and yelling and standing up and just running around the office like, "Someone planted that on me. What is?" You know, he's like going crazy.
Oh my God!
Exorcist.
We're just both sitting there like on the verge of just dying laughing because it's like, you know, this kid literally 10 seconds earlier was like, "Yes, sir, you can." He knew it was in there.
Wow.
Like, so he thinks acting like someone framed him is better than just being honest.
Right. Yes.
I mean, it was the craziest
because
thing.
he thought the shoes, someone somewhere along the way probably told him that the shoes is the safe place and that they'll never search your shoes. You know what I mean? And they get these like urban legends go around the school like, this is how you get away with breaking this rule. If you do this, then you won't get in trouble. Because
it was
he obviously he obviously didn't think it was going to be found and that you were going to find it in the shoes.
It was just, I mean, he was literally, it was like The Exorcist, you know, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, this was yes, sir, no, sir, to oh my effing God, I can't believe, you know, it was hilarious.
The idea that he thinks now that you would believe that someone put that in his shoes.
In his shoe.
Those aren't my shoes.
Yes. I had no idea when I put my shoes on that was there. It's like,
you guys planted it on me.
That's right. And that's one point where I want to ask the kid, I'm like,
to take me down.
It's like, do you think I've never put shoes on before? Do you think I've never had anything in my shoe when I put my shoe on and was somehow like didn't realize? I'm like, if there's a teeny tiny pebble in your shoe, you know that. You let alone 3 bags.
Well, one of my other go-to lines that I've used a lot over the years, you know, kids would come in my office and they would basically smell like they had taken a bath in marijuana. You know, they smoked it before they came to school or they smoked it before they got on the bus.
Smoked it with somebody else, right.
Yeah, exactly. They just didn't have any in their possession. So I would say to the kids, or a kid, I'd say, "How old are you?" "I'm 16. "Okay, what year were you born?" 2001. "Okay. The first time that I was ever exposed to marijuana was 1984. I think I know what it smells like."
Yeah.
And they would just kind of look at me, you know, kids just look at me and they go, "Yeah, okay."
Fair.
What are they going to say? I mean,
right.
It's funny when they level with you too, because especially if they don't have it on you, like I've had kids just admit to it. They're like, "Well, what are you going to do?" I'm like, "I guess I'll call someone. I don't know what they're going to do, but don't be high here, maybe." Like,
and that's one of the things that I think administratively, when we're meeting with kids, you know, of course we're going to give them consequence, whatever it might be, suspension, whatever. But it's like, look, we just want you to be honest with us.
Yes.
It's a lot easier. This process is so much easier if you're honest about what you did. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how we can not do it again. You know, because at the end of the day, unless it's something just so egregious,
right?
No, kids aren't getting kicked out of school because they bring marijuana.
You're not going to jail for murder, right?
Because they get into a fight. And so it's you know, I really try to impress upon the kids, and I think I do this now more than when I first became an administrator, is just really try to get them to be honest about their actions so that we can talk about it and try to figure out ways to not do it again.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in your office because they got caught. So
So it's
might
like,
as well just know all the aspects of what you got caught for.
Just be upfront about it. The last thing I want to do is spend an hour playing games, which we often have to do until we figure out exactly what happened. It's much easier if the kids were just honest about it and we could move forward.
So this brings me to one of my favorite Mr. Admin stories. When I tell people about you, I often tell this story, and you've probably heard me tell it before as well. So I had lunch duty. My lunch duty was in an outdoor picnic area, and you were out there as well. We were kind of just shooting the breeze out there about whatever and watching the kids eat lunch and do whatever they were doing. And this kid comes over to you, and so, you know, I kind of like excuse myself in eavesdropping range. And so you're talking to the kid, and I don't even remember what he did, but I don't think you mentioned it specifically. Like you so-and-so happened with such and such teacher? And he's like, yeah, da da da. And, you're like, okay, so blah, 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 blah. And at the end of it, you're like, so that's going to be 2 days OSS. At which point you hold up your fist and you go, I'll see you in 2 days, ma'am. Be good. And then the kid fist bumps, Mr. Admin, and he's smiling. And then he just looks, and then he like has a moment of realization and he goes, did I just fist bump you for getting suspended for 2 days? But it's because it's like, you're just real about it. It's like, okay, here's the deal. You broke this rule. The consequences of this rule are this. You know that. I know that. I'm not going to not give you the consequences. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to, try and help you, like you said, not to make that decision again so that you can do that. But I'm not going to not give you the consequences. And that's finding that balance between being, having the love, but also setting boundaries with kids, whether it's as a parent, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's as an admin, even when I'm sure you've had that same situation that you've had to dealing with teachers where like there had to be maybe some sort of consequence or something where you had to deal with them and go, hey, it's not that I don't love you. I think you're a great person. I think you're a great teacher, but you made this mistake or we did this, thing, or when I did your observation, I saw this. And so I'm just going to have to stick to what the rules are.
Being on their side doesn't mean saving them from the consequences. Yeah.
Right.
Correct. And that's a really funny story. And as you were telling it, I remember it vividly now. but I mean, that's what I do. That is me in terms of how I approach that part of this role. Mm-hmm. That I am going to hold you accountable, student. I mean, we are here to learn. We're here to be successful. And I'm going to hold you accountable. But that doesn't mean just because I'm holding you accountable, I'm not going to continue to build that relationship with you and support you. Mm-hmm. And I think you guys were talking earlier about the observation process. That's really what the observation process is about. It's not about the ratings. Yes, I understand people get fired up about the ratings, but to just go, I think you made the statement earlier, the ratings don't impact anything. They don't impact whether you get a raise. They don't impact whether you get fired. Not really. I mean, obviously if you have very poor ratings over a sustained period of time and there's all this documentation and there's this and there's that, then maybe you might not have your license renewed in a year or two. That's a very low percentage of teachers.
Right.
So
almost negligible.
Yeah. I mean,
they're going to get fired for something else besides the observations.
Yeah. That's right. So, but the observation
for standing
process,
around sipping coffee during a fight.
Right. Can I help you? Anybody need help here?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But that's the purpose of the observation. It's to identify areas of strength so that you can build around those, and then to really identify areas that, hey, I need help here. Right. One of the things when I was a young teacher, I knew I connected with kids well. I really did. But those first 2-3 years in the classroom, I didn't really know how to manage that inside of a teaching setting. You know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, I know how to build a relationship with each student individually, but having them all together for a limited period of time, 35 of them in a small room, how do I manage that so learning can take place? I mean, this guy that I was telling you about earlier, he helped me with that. He really, in my observations, he gave me real honest feedback and guidance on how to do that. And yeah, the ratings weren't always that great. So what? I mean, this is about growth. I mean, I want every teacher that I work with in my building to teach, quite frankly, to teach their ass off.
Right.
And if they're doing that, then the school is going to be successful.
Right.
The only way you can do that is to know what your strengths are and know where you need to develop and work. So when I get a first or second year teacher who's like, how come I'm not already at proficient? I'm like, if you're already at proficient, why do you need me? I mean, if you're a first or second year teacher and you know what you're doing, I'm irrelevant. And so it's trying to get people to understand that the observation process is not confrontational. It's not supposed to be. Right. I think, unfortunately, as you look at how it's evolved, at least since I've been in the classroom for 20 years almost, it just has become this sort of confrontational piece between admin and teacher.
Right. It feels punitive at times.
Yeah.
Right.
And I get that, and I understand that, and I really try very hard to not make it feel that way for teachers, even when the ratings are not that good. But I really try to push people not to focus on the ratings, and let's focus on the narrative, and let's have conversation about that. Yeah. And what I think good admin do all the time is when they focus on the narrative, they're really pushing teachers to utilize resources that can help them. It's not just, well, you need to do this. It's this is what would help you, and here's how you can go about getting those resources and learning how to implement them and talk to these teachers. And a couple months ago, I was working with a science teacher who has been a longtime teacher, came to this district after 20 years in another district, a much more rural district in North Carolina, a lot smaller. So certainly the demographics were very, very different there, and just the attitudes of the families. So this teacher was having a difficult time managing his classroom. And, I went in and did some co-teaching with him because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I said in his post-conference, I'm going to co-teach, we're going to do some co-teaching. I want you to look at these articles or look up these strategies, but I'm going to get in your classroom with you and we're going to do it together. And he was just so appreciative of that I was taking the time to do that. And I think that's really what good admin out there are doing. And it's not like you can do that every day, all the time for every teacher. You just don't have that kind of time, but you kind of have to know which teachers need that level of support. And I think anyone who's conscientious about their job is going to appreciate that attention to it. As a teacher, I certainly appreciated when that former principal did those kind of things with me, 16, 17 years ago.
I was going to say the best post observations I've had were where we almost didn't look at all at the individual boxes, and we just had a conversation about what happened in my classroom, and almost like a conversation we're having here, where and then that related to oh, what do you think about this, or what, and we would just go off and we just talked about teaching as a profession and as an, it's a science and an art at the same time, and we just kind of got into those things and did that.
Can I ask 2 quick questions?
No.
Yeah, sure.
Aw.
Go ahead.
So you said before that you keep up with some ed journals.
Yeah.
Are there any that you would suggest
That's
for
a good
our
question.
listeners?
So there's a subscription that I subscribe to. It's called Edutopia. Mm-hmm. And Edutopia itself is not a journal. It collects different articles from different journals. Mm-hmm. And so once a week I get an email from them with 10 different articles covering different topics from different publications. And I found that to be really cool because I can just quickly scan to pick topics that I want to read about or that I'm interested in or that I'm having difficulty with and I need some assistance. So Edutopia is a really good, and I think I paid $35 for a 6-month subscription. It's really, you're talking $6 a month. Now within that, I do find a lot of stuff from Educational Leadership, which is a journal out there that's obviously geared for administrators, but teachers could certainly find good stuff in there too.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And I think Ed Week, I've found some really good stuff in before.
Okay.
And that doesn't cost me very much money either. So.
Awesome.
Right. And last thing, 30 seconds or less.
Yep.
What's the big thing that teachers misunderstand about admin?
So I would say first and foremost, we're not on the dark side. There is no dark side in teaching. Okay? We are not there. 2, we really are trying to do this work together. And if we don't collaborate together, teachers, admin, it will not get done. The kids need us to be together. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's just the biggest thing, man. If we're together, working together, understanding strengths and weaknesses, building on those, the kids will be successful. Awesome. So we're together in this.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Hey,
we really appreciate it. Yeah, it was a blast. It was a good time.
It was a good time. Good time. Thanks, guys. Be well. Be safe.
See you later. Thank you as well, Unprofessionals, for listening again. And we really appreciate we've gotten some responses to our survey that we've put in the show notes, so the link to that survey will be there again. And we just appreciate all that you're doing, and we appreciate so much our listeners from around the globe, and we just want to be able to connect with you. So thanks for that. And of course, we always encourage sharing this wonderful podcast with your friends, your family, random people that you barely know on social media, and following us on Twitter at unprocast, emailing us at unprofessionaldevelopmentcast@gmail.com. That's too much for you to remember. Just go down to the show notes again, as well as for some of those resources we talked about in the podcast. Thank you, and stay unprofessional.